I don't know about you, but I don't think many people had an Artificer Unearthed Arcana on their 2024 bingo cards. But if you were wondering what the 13th class in D&D would look like with the design philosophy of the 2024 PHB in mind, stick around because we're going to take a look at every single change they've cooked up for us. Hi there, I'm just a second level fighter who likes talking about Dungeons and Dragons, and if you like to make characters that tinker with and invent things, then consider hitting the subscribe button and checking out some of the other content on the channel. But enough about that, because today we're covering an unearthed arcana, I guess. Yeah, I didn't have this one planned, but I'll admit I'm kind of excited. The new Artificer UA dropped on D&D Beyond this week, and I'm not sure how many people were expecting it. I jumped ship on another subclass video because this grabbed my attention. Anyhow, they've taken the Artificer, which originally appeared in the Eberron book and then a revised version in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and they've given it the 2024 Player's Handbook treatment. It wasn't included in the new PHB for some arbitrary reasons, and a few people were a bit ticked off about that, myself included. But we've probably all imagined how it would look with those design principles in mind, and I'll say it now that if you were expecting massive changes, you might be somewhat disappointed. There are a lot of small changes though, including some alterations to the subclasses. So let's dive in and see what's going on here. I'll also save my overall thoughts for the end of the video. Oh, and if I've missed anything, please forgive me and let me know in the comments. I'll add it in a pinned comment at some point. We'll start off with the general changes to the class itself. They have included sidebars that let us know about major changes, but they don't quite catch everything, so I'll be trying my best to fill in the gaps where possible. Anyways, as an example, the starting equipment has changed. You can now choose a similar loadout, except the only weapon you get access to is a dagger, and you can't get scale mail, which is bad. But you can just choose a flat 150 gold to buy everything, which is probably what you're going with. Then, when multi-classing into Artificer with the UA rules, you don't get proficiency with Thieves' Tools anymore. Instead, you can choose one skill proficiency from the list that Artificers usually get access to. As for spellcasting changes, we have a few minor ones and one major one. You can now replace a cantrip you have prepared at the end of a long rest, which is a nice bit of versatility. You could only do this when leveling up before. You do now also start with less spells prepared, as it is based off a flat number and not your intelligence modifier. You also don't have to spend any time preparing spells during a long rest. It just happens automatically now. Finally, ritual casting has been removed. We are now plebs with instant gratification spells only and the associated costs that come with that. This one is probably going to upset a few players. Now, there are some changes to the spell list, but we'll cover that a bit later. Probably one of the biggest changes is to the magical tinkering feature. This used to let us create some little gadgets that replicated the effects of various cantrips. Now, however, it just lets you create mundane items out of thin air. The items themselves can be picked from a pretty extensive list, and you're probably going to flavor it so that you cobble them together out of whatever materials you have at hand, MacGyver style. You can also use this feature a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier, and the items last 1 hour, after which point they disappear, or more realistically, just break. Yeah, I think with the way we play D&D, MacGruber is going to come out more often than MacGyver. Carrying on, we have the other big change, which is the replacing of infusions with replicate magic item. Now, if you squint your eyes real tight and spin around, this feature looks pretty similar to what it was before. There are some key differences though. You don't infuse items anymore, you straight up just make them out of thin air. And you take magic items from the DMG as well as a few from this UA document and you replicate them. It now explicitly allows you to take any item from the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide as long as it meets a few requirements depending on your level. You can also choose from some other options on a table, and these are more generous in skirting those requirements. The old version of the Artificer only let you choose from the tables it provided, but a lot of people would homebrew rule it so that you could take pretty much anything within reason. On top of that, you now learn plans instead of learning infusions, and yeah, you know fewer than you did before, but you can still create as many as you could, so it's not that bad. You can still replace them when you level up, which is probably going to happen a lot more often now. The items you create also disappear 1d4 days after you die, instead of an amount of days equal to your intelligence modifier. Finally, you learn new levels of plans at certain breakpoints like level 6, 10, and 14, and these are coupled with some other features, so I won't mention it again. These levels also dictate what rarity and type of magic items you can replicate, with weapons and armor generally being learnt before rings and wondrous items. However, all rare items are only learnt at level 14. We'll cover the individual changes to these a bit later though. Moving on with the changes, Right Tool for the Job has been updated so that you can now just make artisans tools with the new magical tinkering feature. Tool expertise has been removed, and this is in line with the rogue being unable to gain expertise with thieves' tools. At the same level, it was replaced with Magic Item Tinker. This lets you basically eat your replicated magic items to regain spell slots, which is interesting. Flash of Genius has been mildly changed to now only work when a creature fails their ability checks or saving throw, very much keeping in line with the 2024 PHB trend of similar features. Magic Item Adept has had its crafting bonus removed but is otherwise the same. We'll see later that each subclass provides a heavily nerfed and more specific version of this crafting bonus. And spell storing item now allows you to store a 3rd level spell inside the item, which is amazing and opens up a fair bit of power for certain subclasses. It also isn't restricted to the spells on the Artificer list, but rather simply Artificer spells, which the extra subclass spells are considered to be. This means that the Artillerist can pop Fireball into their spell storing item and have someone or something use it up to 10 times, which is fun. Just an example. There are probably a few more broken combinations. I think this may be the single most powerful change here. Then Magic Item Savant has lost the ability to allow us to bypass any species, class, spell, or level requirements when attuning to a magic item. This isn't terribly impactful for the vanilla magic items in the game, as very few have such restrictions, but it sucks for more in-depth games with heavy world building and homebrew items. Our feat we gain at level 19 has been changed to an epic boon, as has been the case with every other class. Finally, our capstone, Soul of Artifice, has been gutted, at least in my opinion. It no longer gives you a +1 to all saving throws for each magic item you are attuned to. You can instead add a d6 to one ability check you make, but only once per turn, which is an awful replacement for what was pretty much guaranteed a +6 to all saves. Additionally, when you are reduced to 0 hit points, you can destroy one of your replicated magic items to change your hit points to 20 now instead of 1. This is actually pretty decent. A fair number of changes overall, but the essence of the class still pretty much remains the same. Alright, let's cover the changes to the spell list. There aren't that many despite what it may look like. I've highlighted in green all the additions. All but one of these are from the 2024 Player's Handbook. Everything that is in red is either from Xanathar's Guide to Everything or Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. They don't appear on the list in this Unearthed Arcana, however there is a designer note that specifically states that you can keep using them if you have access to that book. Or rather, those books, because the Xanathar spells didn't get reprinted. Regardless, I'm only going to call out the additions. For cantrips, we gained Elementalism and True Strike. Elementalism is obviously a prestidigitation alternative. It's fun and flavorful and creates some beautiful moments of role-playing. True Strike, however, is an interesting addition for a class that pumps intelligence. Artillerists and alchemists can now use weapons too, I guess. Then, jumping to 2nd level spells, we gain Arcane Vigor. It's okay, but it would have been great if it didn't cost a bonus action to cast, because then it could have been chucked into a spell storing item and passed around the party like a can of galaxy gas. Dragon's Breath has the same issue, but this one you're probably going to have some form of buddy to cast it on, and it is legitimately better than what they can achieve, so not a terrible addition. Then Homunculus Servant might look somewhat familiar. It's an old infusion turned into a brand new spell, and it appears near the bottom of this UA document. This thing is jacked now. The spell summons the homunculus and it scales off of the level of spell slot used to cast it. The new form of this mechanical buddy has more hit points, deals more damage, and has better ability checks and saving throws. It lasts indefinitely like a familiar and no longer takes a bonus action to command in combat. It also communicates telepathically. This is pretty much an auto-take spell, and the funny thing is that wizards would die to get their grubby little fingers on it. An amazing change all things considered. Finally, for the rest of the spell changes at 3rd, 4th, and 5th level, you lose a bunch of stuff if you only use the spell list in this UA, but you also gain Circle of Power, a 5th level spell. This is a strange addition in my opinion. Because of its level, it comes online very late, and while the spell is decent, it isn't going to blow anyone's socks off. It would have been amazing if paired with the old version of Soul of Artifice though, because then you would just succeed on most saving throws, but that isn't quite how this panned out. Still nice to have, I guess. Never going to say no to more options. Okay, this is the part where I may have missed something, so once again let me know in the comments. But I scrubbed through all the old infusion options to see if there were any changes, and lo and behold, we have more than a few. These are now all just magic items that you can pick up the plans for Replicate Magic Item. Arcane Propulsion Armor and Armor of Magical Strength have been yeeted and deleted. To the best of my knowledge, they don't have any replacements in the form of magic items in the new DMG, so I guess they're just kind of gone? Then Helm of Awareness has had a minor change. It no longer protects you from being surprised. And yeah, being surprised now just gives you disadvantage on initiative checks, but it still would have been nice to have that counteracted. And not just by the advantage it gives you on those initiative checks. The Mind Sharpener robes are now a ring that is only available from level 10 onwards. No surprise here, this infusion was really strong. Radiant Weapon got nerfed into the ground. It has gone from a 6th level infusion to a 14th level item because for some reason it is rare. It still only gives a +1 bonus, but the DC to blind attackers is now a flat 15 instead of using your spell DC. I mean, at 14th level, your spell DC would probably be sitting close to 18. So yeah. Also, it requires attunement by a spellcaster for some ungodly reason. You can't even give it to a martial friend if you need to. Really weird changes here. Repeating Shot now requires level 6 and should 100% be called Repeating Weapon. Returning Weapon also requires level 6 now. Then Spell Refueling Ring requires level 10 now instead of level 6, but it only requires a bonus action to use, which is pretty awesome. Finally, the Ring of Water Walking, which was an option for the old Replicate Magic item Infusion that took options from the DMG. Yeah, I know this is a bit confusing because of all the reused old names, but this one was straight up removed from the list of replicable magic items. Those lists exist to lower the requirements to replicate said items because using the new limitations, this ring goes from being available at level 6 to level 10. Kinda sad. It is literally the only one of those items that was changed at all. All of the other unique infusions were folded into their counterpart actual magic items, like Enhanced Weapon becoming a standard +1 weapon. This does mean that you can't make the +2 versions of those items until level 14, when they were previously available at level 10, which is also a bit of a nerf. Well, that about does it for the actual class changes. Let's quickly take a look at how each of the subclasses was changed though, starting with the Alchemist. This is probably the most improved one. Cool Proficiency now lets you brew potions in half as much time. Vitriolic Sphere has taken the place of Blight on our spell list, which is an amazing trade-off. This spell slaps and is way more flavorful and thematic. Then the big one, Experimental Elixirs, got changed. Firstly, you make more of these automatically when you finish a long rest, and you also make more whenever you spend a spell slot to make them. The healing elixir now heals for D8s instead of D4s, and the transformation option on the elixir table has been removed and replaced with an option that simply lets you choose whichever option you like from the table when you roll that result. This is a bit unfortunate for when you spend a spell slot on this feature, as you get to choose for that too, but it's nice for the automatic elixirs you get at the end of a long rest. Elixirs can now also be administered as a bonus action, which is huge. Restorative Reagents, the feature that gives temporary hit points whenever a creature gains the effects of one of your elixirs, now scales off of your intelligence modifier and level. This makes it more reliable and able to scale higher than before. Finally, your capstone, Chemical Mastery, has been reworked. It now lets you deal an extra 2d8 force damage to a single creature once per turn when using specific damage types for a spell. It loses the immunity to the poison condition, and it lets you cast Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron instead of Greater Restoration. I can't think of a more thematic spell for a lover of potions. No doubt the Armorer is what everyone and their grandmother is going to be talking about. The changes here aren't too heavy except for one brand new addition. Anyhow, we can now craft armor in half as much time with Tools of the Trade, which as a side note has a different name to all the other 3 subclasses' similar feature, despite being the same ability. That naming thing is not a change, by the way, that's how it was printed in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. We have the addition of the Dreadnought armor model. This is basically a more offensive suit of armor that can grow in size and has iron balls on chains as its integrated weapons. The flails deal a massive D10 damage and have the reach property. They can also push or pull whatever they hit as long as the target is at least a size smaller than you. Now the armor lets you grow your size to large and later on to huge. And if combined with the enlarged spell, then you can be gargantuan. However, I think it's a neat idea to flavor it so that it's only the armor growing in size and not the artificer inside. The feature does kind of imply that, but we need to make it clear that this is a possibility. I really just want to make a Gundam, and no, I'm not sorry. The Guardian also sees a small change as it can now only use Defensive Field when bloodied or below half of their maximum hit points. Armor modifications has been replaced with armor replication. You can no longer lay on a bunch of infusions in various slots in your armor, instead you just get an additional plan and can create one additional replicated magic item. Both options must be armor though. Much simpler, much less exciting. You also cannot seemingly use replicate magic item to buff up your integrated weapons now, which is not awesome. Finally, your capstone improves the damage of all armor models' weapons. The Dreadnought also gains the ability to fly for some strange, totally not Hulkbuster related reason. I swear it's just a Gundam. I will just mention that I have been racking my brain trying to figure out how to dual wield with these suits of armor, and the only conclusion I have is to multi-class. The 2024 PHB literally removed the ability for these things to make offhand attacks, and I am a bit upset about that. Okay, the Artillerist has some mixed changes. Once again, they can craft a specific type of item faster with tool proficiency, wands in this case. The best change we have here is that you no longer choose a type of Eldritch Cannon when you create one. Instead, whenever you take the bonus action to command your cannon, you then choose which of the 3 effects it activates. This is some amazing versatility that doesn't lock you into having a flamethrower after the horde has been dealt with. It's really a tiny change, but the cannon is no longer treated as having ability scores of 10 across the board for the purposes of ability checks and saving throws. It is now solidly an object, and I assume it just fails any saving throws it is forced to make, but I might be wrong on that one. Finally, and sadly, remote detonation cannot be performed with the explosive cannon feature anymore. You instead use a reaction when your cannon is reduced to 0 hit points. The damage of this feature is increased to 3d10 though. Lastly, we have the Battlesmith, and the changes here are pretty much all focused on the goodest of good boy mechanical buddies, except for the change to tool proficiency that lets us craft weapons in half as much time. Apart from that, the Battlesmith has seen the least impactful changes. There is one other tiny change that isn't really even a change, just more of a renaming of a certain spell. Branding Smite in the additional spells has been replaced with Shining Smite. This is pretty much the 2024 PHB version of that spell. It now requires a bonus action to cast, but additionally also gives advantage on attack rolls made against the target. As for the Steel Defender, it now has slightly less hit points at higher levels. We're talking a difference of around 2 here. However, it actually does slightly more damage with its Force-Empowered Rend, as it now deals 1d8 plus 2 plus your Intelligence modifier. Finally, our buddy got a new trait called Steel Bond, which lets us add our proficiency bonus to any ability checks or saving throw it makes, which is nice. This did replace the Vigilant trait, which now means that the Steel Defender can be surprised. Make of that what you will. Okay, now that we've covered every single change I could find to the Artificer presented here in the UA, what do I think? Well, I'll be honest, this version is actually pretty conservative at first glance. Yeah, I think they could have done way more, but I do like most of what I see. The magical tinkering change is gonna summon some MacGruber energy into all of our games, and I'm completely here and ready for that. I also prefer replicate magic items to the infusion system, but I see some nasty options getting chosen and spread around the party for free, like enspelled weapons that hold some amazing spells for martial classes. Obviously, these are level gated to level 6, but sure, let's make it easier for the rogues to get access to True Strike on their weapons. Why not? Never mind the fact that when you are choosing this plan, you are basically choosing an alternative and lower leveled version of spell storing item, except it has no restriction on the level of spells you can store in the item. Definitely don't see any problems arising here. Yeah, I haven't noodled around too much, so I don't know what the broken possibilities are yet, but Enspelled Weapons popped up immediately. Also, the 3rd level spells getting spammed out by homunculi once Artificers hit level 11 is going to be insane. Can't wait for that. I will say that I particularly appreciate the changes to the subclasses. The Alchemist feels more useful now at high levels, and the Dreadnought is just awesome. However, screw the removal of remote detonation for the Eldritch Cannon though, not a fan of that. But do I think that this is what the final form of the 2024 styled Artificer will look like whenever it gets published? Well, I hope not. I don't particularly like what they did with Soul of Artifice, and they did remove a bit of flavor from some of the magic item interacting features. But artificers are kind of weird, and I'm not entirely sure what I would want them to be able to do. Make it so the armorer can dual wield, I guess. Alright, that was a look at the new Artificer Unearthed Arcana. What do you think about it? I'm really curious to see how this thing is received. Also, did I miss anything? Anyway, if you've made it this far into the video, then you're a legend, and I really appreciate you. I'm considering making a follow-up video where I try build each of these subclasses using some options from the 2024 Player's Handbook. Is that something you'd be interested in? I'm probably going to do it anyway, just because I really want to make a Gundam. But yeah, that'll do it for this one. Cheers.